morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome to the Scrum Simplified podcast. Imagine a place where we tackle the myths that have been surrounding Agile and Scrum and dive deep into the often overlooked and lesser known corners of Scrum. I'm your host, Chandani Patterson, and I am thrilled to embark on this adventure with you. I have been where you are, and I know the joys, the frustrations, and the aha moments that come with working within the Scrum framework. And I'm still learning every day, finding new ways to improve. So whether you're sipping your morning coffee, stuck in traffic, or enjoying a leisurely walk, tune in to our bite-sized episodes. Together, we'll uncover the secrets, debunk the myths, and bring focus to topics that are not very well known and deepen our Scrum knowledge. It's time to dive in, rethink, and rediscover Scrum with Scrum Simplified. So in thinking of how to introduce today's session, well, here it is. Let's talk about retros, baby. Let's talk about the Scrum team. Let's talk about all the good things and the bad things you will see. Let's talk about it. Let's talk retros. Let's talk about it. Let's talk retros. Okay, so first off, let me apologize to you for making your ears bleed from my quote-unquote singing. And secondly, the reason for the singing was to try and make it a bit more fun and interesting. A bit like you want to make your retrospectives. So what exactly are sprint retrospectives? A sprint retro is one of the 5 events in Scrum. It takes place at the end of each sprint, after the sprint review, and before sprint planning. It's like hitting pause for a moment to collectively catch our breath and strategize for the next leg of the journey. The primary goal of the sprint retrospective is continuous improvement. It is there to satisfy the 12th Agile Manifesto principle, which states at regular intervals, the team reflects on how to become more effective, then tunes and adjusts its behavior accordingly. Just as the sprint review is an inspect and adapt event for the increment, the retrospective is an inspect and adapt event for the team. So we are looking inwards at how we work, our processes, and our practices. To better understand the need for a retro, imagine you're an athlete training for high rocks. Yes, I do have high rocks on the brain. Another apology. Anyway, so after each intense training session, you take time to reflect on your performance, identify areas for improvement, and adjust your training plan accordingly. Sprint retrospectives serve that same reflective pause for Scrum teams, allowing them to inspect their recent sprint, adapt their approach, and continuously refine their performance. Everyone in the Scrum team are required at this event, so it is not an optional event. This includes the Scrum Master, the Product Owner, and the developers. It is, however, only for the Scrum team and not for anyone outside the team itself. The Scrum team inspects how the last sprint went with regards to individuals, interactions, processes, tools, and the definition of done. Now, what exactly is inspected may change depending on the context or domain of work. Assumptions that were wrong or flawed are identified and their origins explored. The Scrum team discuss what went well during the sprint, what problems it encountered, and how those problems were or were not solved. The event is time-boxed to a maximum of 3 hours for a 1-month sprint. For shorter sprints, the event is usually shorter. Ideally, you want to keep it short so that people are involved throughout and don't lose focus with very long retros. Now, what is discussed in a retro should be for the team only, unless, of course, it's an organization-wide process that needs to be changed. I always say that we follow the Vegas rule for retrospectives. What happens in a retro stays in a retro. The retro has a facilitator who ensures an environment where everyone feels comfortable sharing their thoughts. You want to encourage honesty and transparency. The more open the team is, the more effective the retrospective will be. And remember, it is not about pointing fingers, it's about finding solutions together. Now let's talk agenda. You do not have to follow a fixed agenda at all. But if you are doing this for the first time or would actually prefer following an agenda, then you can follow the steps as identified by Esther Darby in her book, Agile Retrospectives, Making Good Teams Great. It is a fantastic book. I would definitely recommend reading this book. I will add a link to it in the description. Anyway, in her book, Esther identifies a 5-step process for Agile retrospectives. So imagine this is a 5-act play, if you will. Act 1, we set the stage, where we welcome the team, we create a positive and open vibe. Clearly define the purpose of the retrospective and the scope of discussion. I would say ideally start each retro with the retrospective prime directive, which states that regardless of what we discover, we understand and truly believe that everyone did the best job they could, given what they knew at the time, their skills and abilities, the resources available, and the situation at hand. The prime directive is there to help ensure that the retro starts in a positive and result-oriented way. Get the team to check in and get the event on the road. Act 2, we go into gather data. This is where we dive into the nitty-gritty of what happened during the sprint. Metrics, stakeholder feedback, the good, the bad, the ugly. It's all fair game. The idea is to get a clear picture of our performance during the last sprint. Act 3, we generate insights. Now this is where the team get together to identify what went well and what could be improved. So you've collected all your data. Now we're going to start to categorize this into positive aspects of what went well and areas for improvement, what could be done better. Encourage participation from everyone at this point, ensuring all voices are heard. It's like a brainstorming session, but with a clear goal, making the next sprint better. Act 4, you want to decide what to do. Now that you've gathered all the data, categorized it, it's time to figure out what actions we can take to improve. Prioritize the identified areas for improvement and collaboratively brainstorm and develop actionable steps to address the prioritized issues. We want to be specific, measurable, and focused on things we can actually implement in the next sprint. Wrapping it up is Act 5, close the retrospective. We summarize the key takeaways and action items, making sure everyone's on the same page. It's like the curtain call for your retrospective play, acknowledging the team's efforts and our commitment to getting better. End it with a retro of the retro. So basically 5 stages. You want to set the stage, you want to gather the data, you want to generate insights, categorize it, you want to prioritize it and decide what you want to look at, and then you close it off. That's the 5 steps. The sprint retrospective concludes the sprint and the next sprint starts straight after. Now, I have seen some very common misconceptions, dysfunctions, or questions around sprint retros. I'm going to try and address some of them here. One very common misconception is that this event is a Scrum Master event. Scrum Masters rule this event, and it should always be facilitated by the Scrum Master. This is actually not true. A Scrum Master does not need to facilitate a retro or any other Scrum event for that matter. They do need to make sure that the event happens and serves its purpose while keeping it positive and productive. Another common dysfunction is inviting everyone into the retro. Managers, CEOs, stakeholders, people on the street, all welcome. No, this is an event just for the Scrum team. It is important to let the team have psychological safety and a safe environment where they can openly discuss issues and what improvements are needed without any fear of reprisals from managers or having an adverse effect on the team member for having spoken out. If managers want to find out the current work status, please invite them to the sprint review instead. If you have a team that's been working for a long time, you may end up with the team thinking that they no longer need retrospectives, and so this event can be skipped. Every team can improve no matter how high performing they get. Find the reasons why they think that it's no longer needed and try to educate the team on the reasons for having a retro. As a Scrum Master, what can you do to change it up a bit so people are feeling enthusiastic about the retrospective? Another problem is when the retrospective turns into a blame game. We want to try and focus on the process and not on the people. We want to follow the Scrum values of openness, respect, and courage. As a facilitator, it is your job to ensure the event runs smoothly and positively. If emotions are running high, take a quick break and then get back to it. Gently redirect the conversation back to the process or behavior rather than personal attacks. Emphasize that the goal is to improve the team's overall performance. If you find that the situation has escalated or become difficult to manage, stop and consider seeking external facilitation from a neutral third party. Sometimes you may be too close to the situation to see the wood for the trees. An experienced external facilitator can help guide the discussion, mediate conflicts, and ensure a productive outcome. So we said that the retro is where we inspect and adapt. Does that mean that you have to wait until the retro to handle all issues? No, definitely not. Although the retro is a formal event specifically for improvements, if the team identify an issue mid-sprint that could potentially harm the sprint goal, please do not wait until the retro to deal with it. Instead, get the team to find a solution for this immediately rather than waiting until the end of the sprint for the retro. So these were some of the more common issues I have come across. If you have any other questions that you would like answered, please do share these with me. I'd be very interested to hear what issues you are finding happening around sprint retrospectives. Before we finish, I'd like to share some tips and tricks. Firstly, keep the retro time boxed and respect the time box. Remember, a retro is for the team to improve, so focus on the problem, not on the people. I've said this before. No blaming, no finger pointing, don't make it personal, and don't take things personally. Plan your retrospectives. Don't just turn up and run it the same way each time. Don't blindly go into start, stop, continue, or sad, mad, glad, or any other 3-column formats every single time. The team are going to start finding retros boring and stale and a waste of time. As a Scrum Master, notice what is happening with the team and the process during the sprint. Are you noticing any issues? Has there been any conflicts? Are you noticing a pattern of working that is not productive or needs improvement? Bring these to the next retro and discuss it with the team. A retro can and should be used to discuss process as well as interpersonal team relationships. Now, if the main issue being discussed during a retro is interpersonal dynamics, then use a retrospective technique that specifically is addressing this. For example, you have exercises like Team Radar or Timeline to help visualize team emotions and dynamics over time. Keep the retro positive. It is the job of the facilitator to ensure that the retro is conducted in a positive, productive environment and that everyone is involved. Swap the facilitation role within the team. I love doing this personally. I really do. Don't let it fall to the same person, the same coach, the same Scrum Master each time. You could even use a facilitator from outside the team, say another team Scrum Master. A fresh perspective can bring new insights, and different facilitators may introduce diverse approaches to problem solving. And it keeps the retros interesting and the team involved. If this is not the very first retro for this team, then start the retro by going over the last retro actions and how the team got on with them. If you're finding that the team are taking on actions but not completing most of them, find out why. Find the root cause, and that may help identify better actions to take into the next sprint. And yes, also consider reducing the number of action items that you're taking in. Leading on from this last point, don't try to take every action identified and change them all at one go, because that is never going to work. As a team, when you gather insights, when you start to prioritize, you want to identify the highest priority actions that need to be dealt with ASAP. These are the ones we work on in the next sprint. And when the team identifies these high priority actions, make sure that the action is assigned to someone. Don't leave it open. Have someone accountable for each item. The team could also allocate dedicated time during each sprint for addressing improvement actions, obviously depending on what the action is. There is a reason we do retros. It's not just attend the meeting and then go away and do nothing about it. Make sure the identified actions are followed through. Send that information out to the team. Keep everyone in the loop. Consider adding the actions to the sprint backlog to ensure that they will be followed through on it. A retro should also be used to celebrate successes. Did you have a smooth launch? Celebrate it. Had a particularly difficult sprint, but the team still managed to hit the sprint goal? Congratulate them on a work well done. Focus on the positive along with improvement. Recognize what worked well and try to build upon these positive aspects. And lastly, always retro a retro. Gather feedback on the retrospective process itself and incorporate suggestions into future retrospectives. Final thought on retros. Sprint retrospectives are a mandatory event in Scrum. Think of them as the team's dedicated time to reflect, learn, and continuously improve. It's not just about what went wrong, but also about celebrating successes and finding ways to do even better. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey. If you found this valuable, please consider subscribing through your favorite podcast app. Giving this podcast a rating and/or review also helps others find this podcast. And please feel free to share this episode with your friends and colleagues. Also, do share your thoughts or questions and let me know how I can make this better for you. So until next time, my Scrum enthusiasts, keep that flame of learning burning bright. The journey to Scrum simplicity is yours to own, and I'm here with you every step of the way. This is Chandani signing off from Scrum Simplified. Catch you in the next episode, and until then, thrive in the world of Scrum and keep reaching for those agile stars. Stay curious, stay agile, and never stop simplifying.